Hi, welcome to Media Nama. The global race for supremacy is on. The line that divides technological advancements and global politics, which was kind of never present, now AI has just amplified the urgency to have its own sovereign AI stack. So it's kind of similar to every nation wanting to have its own nuclear power, right? So we are discussing AI sovereignty today because OpenAI's recent announcement welcoming foreign nations to partner with it, and it promises to build a sovereign democratic AI as a part of its Stargate project. It is now it is aiming to fight authoritarian AI to quote, prevent it from consolidating power, unquote. The news comes with a context. Just a few days prior to the announcement, OpenAI said it's going to be non-profit once again after becoming a for-profit company after the Microsoft's investment in it. And it also said it's going to be an open source technology once again. After OpenAI's push for welcoming other countries to partner with it, it also announced that it is going to establish data residencies in Asian countries, including India. So this sequence of events raises a few important questions that needs to be answered. What is sovereign democratic AI in the first place? Why are we in a global race to achieve this AI supremacy? What's the point of talking about AI stack sovereignty when we rely exuberantly on NVIDIA's GPUs, which is also a US based company? Moreover, and more importantly, why should it all be led by none other than United States of America? To answer our questions and curiosities, we have Rostam J. Neuwirth, Professor and Head of Department of Global Legal Studies of University of Macau. Hello, welcome Rostam.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you very much for having me and for inviting me to this interview, and especially raising so many difficult questions that are, in fact, at the moment, a major and global concern. I have also dedicated a lot of time in the past years to the analysis, and especially the analysis of the regulatory debate about AI. So this marks another interesting development in these last years, and the developments have been very, very fast, which makes it very difficult to actually answer in a future-proof or consistent way many questions, because things, and not only in the field of AI, recently geopolitically, every morning has a lot of surprises. Even I'm a trade lawyer or traditionally have worked a lot in trade law, and there we have also seen a lot of uncertainties. So uncertainty is at the moment the only certainty we have, it seems. And when it comes to AI, I think if I may start with your second question or comment in a way, I'm not happy with the terminology and narrative of a global race of developing AI or regulating AI. In fact, I think I don't know why this became so popular. It is the wrong terminology, especially in a legal context. I think we should not rush or race. Racing is for sports or something, but not for regulation. Because I didn't understand the whole media, or the hype, or by lawmakers to try to be the first. I would rather see one to be best in regulating it, and that includes also when you intervene to regulate it, because it is a rapidly changing environment. So this is probably the hardest question. So with that, I would have preferred actually, and I still prefer, and I think we urgently need a global kind of dialogue, cooperation platform to tackle these challenges that are changing every day, instead of having a global race. And it is clear also from many other aspects that it is an issue that is already of global concern. I think this has been reflected with the adoption of the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI, which is simply by the fact that all of UNESCO's members have agreed to this comprehensive text, which highlights a lot of the potentials, but also the risks related to AI, shows it is a global concern. And then there is also, I think, a technological aspect that most of the underlying, the infrastructure, the systems, etc., are interconnected and therefore require some kind of global coordination, as does the economy already. And in fact, the planet has always been one, I think. So I would rather see a joint effort to cooperate on regulating AI in a comprehensive, in a consistent way, and not only see national or regional actors pushing forward and pursuing a race, because there is very good literature that shows already and has compared the terminology to arms race, space race. This has not, or you started also with the analogy to nuclear energy. This is clearly not the best way to approach an issue, any regulatory issue, but certainly not one which of the importance of AI and related technologies. And that also means is immediately do you want to come back? Do you have a question or a comment? Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, before understanding why the race has begun, I'm sorry to use the word again. You know what I mean by the race, right? The global competition. First, let's try to understand what is sovereign AI and why is it necessary? Why the nations are feeling that we should have our own sovereign AI models. Let's start with the basic fundamentals first, please. What is sovereign AI and why is it important?
Right. I can only say that this is a difficult question too, because I have studied from even before AI. I mean, there was a 20 years a debate about cultural diversity and global trade, and I think you can compare it in a way to that you have certain products which challenge our traditional understanding of a product, that we used to define them as something economic, commercial, or non-commercial, and cultural, for example. And that's why they received special treatment. And in international law, very often it was exempted from, for example, from the rules of trade. And we still have a lot of exceptions for environmental products and so on and so forth. But the reality has taught us actually that you can't separate it. And now in international cultural law, it has also been recognized that cultural products are both cultural and commercial in nature, or have. In fact, there are many complex connections. And on top of it, I can say when we look at digital platforms, and from this whole cultural diversity debate, it was Marshall McLuhan, for example, who said the medium is the message, right? You can also, it's very difficult to separate even the content from the medium on which the content is, or in which it is stored, right? And nowadays we have, with digital technologies, we have the possibilities to transform a book into a digital file or print it out again, and then it's a good or it's a service. It transcends all these dichotomies we have built. And in my view, the same applies to sovereign AI. It would mean that actually, I mean, that is also the plan of OpenAI or the US government at the moment. I mean, to provide it all. Both the hardware, the software, from basically the whole life cycle of AI, plus the hardware you need to operate these systems. And that is clearly then again bringing in an element that is deeply non-sovereign for those who are just using it. I mean, in this sense, I see clearly that even, and that was mentioned already by colleagues who studied the digital platforms, American colleagues even, who told me that, for example, Europe is having a public debate about shaping its public opinion with European content, but presented on American digital platforms. Because Europe doesn't have its own digital platforms like the US has, and like the People's Republic of China has. In fact, Europe has regulated a lot of these platforms, Digital Services Act, AI Act, etc., but it doesn't have domestic grown platforms. And I think it has an impact. And this is exactly what we face also with AI, I think, where it becomes also clear I remember when I used ChatGPT the first time, I asked simply my first question was something like, who are the 10 most important philosophers in human history? And 9 out of 10 were ancient Greek philosophers. And having worked in India or now working in China, I think it's not representative of the human history. It is representative of the data with which it was trained, and which was most likely some library in the United States or something. And that, I think, reflects the problem. The linguistic cultural diversity is an important feature of our planet, and it is something that has, even in terms of law, there are several conventions, has been recognized and must be preserved. And that's why I think the debate about sovereign AI, in a way, is valid, although it may also be a kind of oxymoron, in a sense that it is very difficult to even speak of sovereignty in the digital world, because cyberspace as such does not have like a territorial boundary, but we may have to redefine what we mean by sovereignty in non-territorial terms. But in my view, it would mean that you have a way to participate in not only the content creation. And that's where my problem lies with the proposal of OpenAI, in a way, because I think providing all the hardware and the system and all this, and then you just add a few databases for the training, it's still not genuinely representing the diversity of the world. If that is what you were aiming at with your question, I hope.
Yeah. And OpenAI in its announcement also says that it's going to fight authoritarian AIs, and promoting, it's providing the democratic sovereign AI. So why are we discussing democratic and authoritarian AIs? So it's evident that it's implying Chinese AI models, right? I assume.
That is the usual, discrepancy I observe a lot in many debates. I mean, for example, when it comes to digital platforms and certain content that is deemed unacceptable in China, whenever you read about China from outside commentators, it's called censorship. And when you read about it in Europe or the US, it's called content moderation. But in effect, it's the same thing. You take content away for whatever reasons, and it's the same with democracy. Democracy is and first of all, it is very difficult to already frame such a complex issue in a dichotomous way, in my view. I'm very much against these binaries. They are good for simplification, but they are not good for constructive dialogue, which is why I have written a whole book about oxymoron paradoxes, in fact. So authoritarian and democracy as an opposition is not a good starting point. The second thing is, and that's already linking also to the question of sovereign AI, who defines what is democracy? I mean, democracy is such a sensitive concept in the sense that it is volatile and constantly evolving, and even every democracy, whatever that was in the history, has changed and must change to remain a democracy, and so on and so forth. Like, I was born in Austria, probably a democracy. When I was born, is it still one? Probably, but it has changed in ways we can't, even imagine in my short lifetime. So that would be a problem, for example, if we have an AI system which has its own understanding of what is democracy and then transports that to other regions. In my view, to be truly democratic means you have to guarantee some sort of access. And that is, by definition, then not possible if we have one defining what it is as opposed to others. And that's not a good starting point also for a constructive dialogue about the future of use of AI in a much broader sense. Clearly, I object to one defining what democracy is, actually, and that is also something today that is harmful to the a constructive dialogue in the world, because we are not sitting together and talking actually what it means to have a democratic system. We only hear like the same ideas repeated without going into like details or trying to elaborate what it means to have a democratic society in the 21st century with all these digital technologies and information communication technologies and mass manipulation tools that are out there, for example. I mean, that would be more constructive than saying this is more clearly a commercial strategy than a policy proposal, in my view.
And you said it's oxymoronic in a sense that to talk about sovereignty in cyberspace, right? But again, the global dependence and interdependence is inevitable. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages do you see in a situation where a country has to rely on another country to build the whole AI stack? Uh, in a sense, it won't be sovereign anymore, right? The moment it's an oxymoronic term. The moment
Mm-hmm.
the foreign company is relied to build another company's AI stack. So, what do you see the advantages and disadvantages for the countries and for the companies as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I approach this question from the perspective of trade law in a way which is based on the economic theory of comparative advantage, and actually the understanding that I liked very much in a book about the history of trade. I read that, you know, the world is very different. Every single individual is actually unique. Paradoxically, we are the same in a way that each one of us is unique, and no second one exists, and that is not a contradiction. To the contrary, this is a complementary, is an opportunity for us to add to the overall, like, and in the case of trade, it means we specialize in order to exchange goods and services, and in the end, everyone else is better off because we have greater choice. We do not want to have only one product, or we have no plant. Some plants don't grow, which can provide certain medicines. And for the same reason, we must, I think, make sure that our AI can be organized in a way that certain things are specialized and assembled somewhere, or something like we have very often, like, you know, designed in California, made in China or something. We need this kind of collaboration and access to it. And it doesn't matter in the end who did which part, but we have to have access. And it cannot be done that only a ready-made product arrives and you have no, as a customer, you have no more control over the product in the end. And so we need to make sure that, and that is the big challenge of AI for me. It's an extremely complex cross-cutting issue, which you cannot successfully address without considering every field of society. It must start at the educational level in the end. It must also involve health, public health considerations, cultural considerations, in financial, because it is a multi-purpose tool. And it is very difficult, therefore, to come up with a coherent policy. But that's why it's also a great opportunity for all coming together and shape these like new technologies together. So the only importance is that, of course, I think it is important that those countries that have an advantage in the technology will make it available, but it has to be done in a better way than the way it has been done in the past. When we look at, for example, the regulation of intellectual property rights, because I think we have the wrong understanding of what is of value. We only look at a very narrow, like, definition of commercial value. Precisely, that was the issue with the debate between commercial and cultural aspects of goods. And it's the same in intellectual property rights, that maintaining a kind of diversity of nature is also of great commercial value. But that is usually not recognized, for example, by the TRIPS agreement. Would be traditional knowledge. And India has done, I think, a great job in defending some of the plant variety and traditional knowledge against the commercial exploitation only. And this must also be achieved here because the AI debate, as I have, and there's a good paper out now on the so-called Silicon Valley effect, that in fact, a lot of the debates were hijacked in many ways already by those corporations building the AI. And it's not a good idea that you have those developing the product also regulating it in a way. And here I have the same concern that commercial corporations cannot be entrusted alone with providing the public goods to a country or to the whole world. So that would be my concern about sovereignty, especially.
True. So this connects to the follow-up question. Uh, what, what, how does it make sense to talk about AI sovereignty when the whole world is reliant on solely NVIDIA's GPU chips, predominantly is dependent on NVIDIA's GPUs. So how is it make it sense? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. How does it make sense to you?
Yeah, this is also something that I tend to answer with an oxymoron, namely the one of co-opetition instead of competition versus cooperation. I mean, I'm not a competition lawyer, but I'm familiar with competition law's purpose, and it plays an important role in any in any legal framework governing the economy. For example, when we have countries joining the EU, for example, as a member, like my own country, Austria, joined in 1995. It's a tiny market joining a big market, especially in neighboring Germany with big car makers, right? Before you have tariffs, before you join, and then when you join a free a customs union or a free market area, then you no longer have that protection. And that's where competition law comes in, that you know, like kind of control the abuse of dominant positions. And we have seen in the past, and this is a misunderstanding, in which is why even in economic development, the race terminology is wrong. I would keep it to sports, because when you race to become the biggest, it very often ends up in a situation where you are in a dominant position, and then you have no more competitors and no one to also cooperate and measure yourself against. And that, Nokia as an example, may mean that you lose contact in a way with the reality and with your in the context also. And then you may not remain competitive, and because you become in a way complacent with, I'm number one, I don't have to do anything. So it is in the interest of even companies, I think, to have a sustainable development, to remain in business for a long time and not just make a lot of profits and then go bust or go out of business or be bought by someone else. You should always consider also your competitors as potential partners for cooperation in a way. And it is fine that some sectors are dominated by certain players, like the chip market or whatever. But it is also erroneous, if you ask me, to think you can do it all. And that's exactly the lesson we should have learned about trade substitution. No country can produce everything. It's impossible. I mean, you don't have all the rare earth, or you don't have this ingredient for this medicine, etc., etc. So here are clearly limitations, and that's why it's a strong argument also for, I mean, what you call like AI sovereignty, in a way that we need to make sure that there's an equal access to the resources, and we need to also value, for example, what is not happening at the moment, in my view, is in the AI versus IP debate. The copyright protected works are not valued sufficiently against the value that these companies have then, and what they charge you for their services that they created out of a pool of copyright protected data. And it's the same thing, like I said, with traditional knowledge, and it is the same thing with cultural knowledge and cultural values. It is wrong to assume that a language only spoken maybe by 2 million people is of less importance to humanity than one that is spoken by, I don't know, half of the world. And that must be, in a way, taken into account, in my view.
And sovereignty also means strict and strong data protection laws, right? So, how do you see the cross-border transfer of information, users' information, private information, sensitive information? How do you see this is going ahead? Because we are, by definition, placing our users' data into another hand. Let so they are promising data residencies. It's a okay, but again, you are essentially giving your nation's whole database to a private company. So how do you see this cross-border transfer of data going to private companies? How do you see this?
Yeah, this is also a kind of strange dilemma in a way that on the one hand, we want to localize the data and protect them, but on the other hand, we want to have as many data as possible. So it's the same thing again, that when it's your interest, you want more, and when it's against your interest, you want less. I mean, we have seen that in every trade dispute in the past. So again, I think we also need to understand another paradox there, of course, is that people themselves are also sometimes, of course, manipulated into sharing more data than they should actually. There is also an unsolved issue of what is the value of data. I mean, people think, for example, very commonly that the internet is free and the social media are free. No, you pay at least with your time. Time is money too. You pay also with your data, and your data nowadays, we don't even know what that includes anymore. I mean, I'm no expert in all these technologies, but you can, in the meantime, the human organism is no longer, there is no more privacy, no privacy of your thoughts, no privacy of your heartbeat rate, of your breathing rate, all of which can be used to biometrically identify you. Even the way you walk and the way you type on the keyboard can be personalized. And we know also that even anonymized data can be configured in a way that you can identify the person. So again, I think the only way here is building trust through cooperation in the end. That would be in the interest of everyone. And to have a competitive market with as many players as possible. But I see no other way around, starting from a constructive dialogue on this. And we see a lot of, I think, regional trade agreements addressing this issue, and that will probably be the short-term development, in my view, as when it comes to this data. And
Yeah,
exchange will be gradually liberalized. Yeah.
Talking about trust, OpenAI said that it's going to be open sourced again after being closed source after Microsoft's series of investments. Now it said that it's going back to be open source again. So how do we read this in the context that OpenAI wants more public-private partnerships, especially with the countries? How do we see this open source trend again?
Well, this is, to be honest, I do not understand exactly the different distinctions between open and closed, because there are also, this is more like different shades of gray than a clear black and white situation, as far as I was told by computer scientists. So, and it's the same problem with the distinction between public and private. This has bothered me a long time also in the way we have organized the framework, the global framework of law is still very much, or the international legal system is still based on this public-private distinction. And that this poses also a serious problem in the debate at the moment, because in China, a lot of the development is more based on the government, and the government also maybe governing the economy, whereas it seems now pretty obvious that in the US, it's more the economy governing the government. And so we have both public and private actors participating. In the past, it was more like we only, like in the WTO, you only have public entities as members, and you cannot go there as a private company and maybe challenge a measure of government. So this mixed transnational terminology has still not yet even reached the legal community. We still use this outdated term of public international law. So we need to find a solution for that. And then we also need to see that the distinction between, it's not a binary choice clearly, because what is a crowd, right? One person, two persons, three persons is all the paradox of heap again. And we need to find more consistent frameworks that allow the successful participation of both public and private actors. This is also what is the debate about how to institutionally govern AI in the future. Some have proposed something like the International Atomic Energy Organization. Some have said, no, we need a multi-stakeholder public-private, like ICANN, for example, or we need to open here, I think, the debate to very new proposals and more inclusive ways of governing, because the technologies themselves allow that. I was, for example, in a way, I have written that, I think, already in a book 4 or 5 years ago, where I said, why can we not have, for example, and this is an opportunity for private companies, a UN-led initiative, like we have Google Earth, right? We have Google Maps, we have Google Scholar, but we don't have a global legal database for the UN framework, for example. I mean, the UN wanted to reform itself in 2006 under Kofi Annan to deliver as one. And in the age of the internet, we still do not have like a comprehensive database by public players even connecting them. They still use the red telephone, for emergencies or something, but we have real-time traffic tracking and so on, but we cannot communicate here between governments and international organizations and provide the information. I think this is a shortcoming that should be addressed, and companies, I think, should come forward, but should not come forward as private, like with their private commercial interests. They should have these interests in mind, but approach public players, because they do not have the legitimacy to represent, I think, like public concerns. They should cooperate with public entities to meet the public concerns through private initiative. That is all fine. That is what it was always, how it's been done in the history of humanity, I think.
Yes, that's very good point. Now I want to understand what are the implications of having a state-sponsored and state-controlled AI models in a country? First of all, should the state control AI models? Should the state own AI models?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. I mean, this is something that I see also that, for example, historically in Europe, the mass media and then the resulting fascism under Hitler, Mussolini, and so on, has led to the perception that the danger always comes from the government and Orwellian scenario, and citizens are subject to oppression and to misinformation and all this. And this overlooks the fact that a lot of this is already happening too, from private sources. I think that mass manipulation, for example, or we have the Black Box Society is a book written in 2015 by an American scholar showing that there are plenty of lists circulating or algorithms determining used by private entities that determine whether your application for this or a loan for that is successful or not, right? So nowadays, or it's the private. You can have, unfortunately, abuse of dominant positions in the private sector, and you can have it in the public sector. And that's why we need to build, I think, sustainable legal frameworks that can balance the two. Because I once read when I was in India, I think in a book, it said no one can long stay in in one extreme, right? I mean, the excessive is to be avoided. It's not only the public or not only the private, because neither of them can exist with the other. So it's complementary, and we need to find frameworks and also like mold that into the technologies. And I think it is good if the public has also a say in the way, of course, the technologies are developed. Like as a customer, I wish many products nowadays would listen more to the customers in what they want, because I think a lot of developments are even in the development of simple tools like smartphones or electric cars. They are too they're not listening to the consumer needs, and that can only be guaranteed if you provide some voice also to the collective. In the end, the challenge, in my view, has always been to find the best possible balance between the interests of the individual and the collective as a whole. And that means also locally and globally, and including cultural, linguistic, and other forms of diversity. That's a huge challenge, and it has been the challenge for humanity ever since we existed, and it will probably not stop. But we have learned a lot, and we should apply at least the knowledge we have gained in the last 30, 40 years and reform the international framework, which has remained unaltered since 1945. And there was a summit of the future held last year, and there's no debate about that. But we constantly debate what Bill Gates or Sam Altman or Elon Musk say. I just wonder, what is their legitimacy? For example, Bill Gates told me in several videos that the lawyer will no longer exist in 10 years. Okay. So, but how does he? I'm not going out and say Microsoft will not exist in 10 years. I mean, I don't know. It's just not, neither do I have the legitimacy to say that about his company, nor does he have it to say it about my profession. He's not even a lawyer, as far as I know. So we need to find a good platform for a better dialogue, and that would be urgent, in my view. And nonetheless, these digital technologies can provide also virtual platforms like we have, and that even hasn't been explored, in my view, enough, in terms of e-governance between. This is clearly something that should be advanced. And in that sense, that push is also good. But when it becomes ideologically charged with authoritarian versus democratic, it's no longer credible, I think, and it loses also the value that it could have. And that's a difficult challenge we face with these technologies, which are no longer, we can no longer classify them as they're good or bad. They're all dual use. They're too complex. We need to find different ways of tackling that.
In this whole context that we have discussed till now, uh, do you think the nation should be encouraged to partner with private companies? I want this as a conclusionary statement or a conclusionary point to understand, should the nations be encouraged to have public private partnerships with private companies to build AI stack, sovereign AI stacks? Yeah.
The question is, it depends already. I mean, my answer would depend on what you mean by nations, right? Because nations is also, we had, the evolution of international law came from the family of nations, and then it became, or the law of nations, and then international law. And then now we have something like maybe transnational or global law. I mean, if you talk about the nation state, then, I mean, of course, I think what we need is a very well-functioning, like I said, inclusive, multi-level governance system in the future. I mean, we know that the territorial nation state is a brainchild of the 17th century, probably, and it is largely obsolete in many areas because we had a global pandemic. It doesn't stop. I mean, a virus doesn't stop at the border. The weather doesn't stop at the border. Even certain military conflicts, nuclear, they can destroy the whole planet. We need a global kind of consciousness, and we need it very local down to the individual. Because I like a lot the term collective intelligence, or crowd intelligence, it is also called, which is another oxymoron because it is about finding the best input from an individual and make it available to the collective. It's the same idea of the whole intellectual property law. You reward an individual for providing a beneficial invention or a good movie or a good book to society as a whole. That's what it's all about. And we forget that constantly. We still think so much it's me or you, it's me against you. And it's, for example, when you start thinking paradoxically, even the border between two countries, it's not the line that separates them. It's also the line that connects them. For example, when I wrote a book about the BRICS countries, India is part of that, no? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the original five. People said it can't work because many of them, Brazil and South Africa, do not have, are regionally too far away. They do not have a border with them. But then when you have a border, it becomes also a conflict. We never make full use of the potential because we always think it's either this or that instead of seeing it in a complementary way. In that sense, we need a new way of thinking. And AI forces us to do that, I think, because it is actually an oxymoron, first of all. This is also something that is unfortunately completely neglected. We always look at it as artificial intelligence. When you think of it as an oxymoron, you can, for example, start reversing it. And I found a very good article that said it's IA, not AI. IA standing for intelligence augmentation, for example. That would give it a very different understanding. What is the purpose of technology? It is not to outperform humans. It is not to replace humans. It is not to remove all dignity of humans. It is to enhance human lives. And with it also, we need to change that too. We need also to have a more comprehensive understanding of humans' role in the whole universe, probably, because why is AI an oxymoron? Because we think humans are the only intelligent beings, and I think many animals and even plants deserve to be called intelligent too. That's the irony. We are debating a product using intelligence as a standard and don't even know what human intelligence is, because there are many aspects of it, like emotional, social, cultural intelligence. We don't know. It's an evolving concept too. So we must make sure that we can use it for this purpose, but that requires that we are aware of what we are talking about. Are we talking about artificial intelligence as a product, or are we talking it as a tool to augment human intelligence? That would be the first thing. Second, we should not call it a race. We should call it a kind of project to cooperate, finding a multi-level governance system that includes everyone. And also, I think we have clearly established nation states, and they play a very important role, but they are just one level in a larger layer of levels. We have very important, every society developed very local systems of governance, and we all have individuals too. And we have also, of course, change and migration across these levels and lines we have drawn, and we need to establish, therefore, a suitable institutional framework. That's what institutions are there for. They are providing stability for change. And I think that is what I would answer to your question.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. So that's very good talk, Rostam. I'm out of questions now, and I think we have answered every question, uh, specifically the oxymoronic nature of how this debate is going on, and which is hard to come at a conclusion at the binary level, right? So it's very, yeah, the perspectives were very interesting. And yeah, thank you for speaking to Media Nama, Rostam.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I look forward to maybe continuing the conversation, because I'm sure by tomorrow certain aspects will be very different from what we've discussed today.